Okay, good morning, everyone. Just to let you know up front, if you're only just joining, we are recording this team session to turn it into a video to share afterwards. As with the other Teams or Google Meet sessions, if you all could mute your microphones unless you're asking a question, it helps with the background noise. I know a few of you have asked, and Joy just asked that question then, and it seems to be a bit of a hot topic, as Turn It On consultants have asked me. You can't change the 4 thumbnails in the Teams window. It will just display the people that have spoken most recently. So you can pick from people down the bottom. If you've got the desktop app installed, normally the different participants are along the bottom horizontally. If you're using the web app, which means you've opened it up in a tab of your web browser, they're often stacked vertically on the right hand side by default. So you can go to other people, but that's just how it works. At the moment, Microsoft haven't got any firm plans to change that. It's just the way it is, particularly with broadband speeds and people working from home. They've tried to limit it to 4 screens at a time because it can be quite demanding as far as data is concerned. Okay, let's get down to business. So today is a follow-on from the last team session. Had some feedback from last week's team session, which was completely separate to the one I did earlier in the week, and also the one on Tuesday, that people wanted to just go a little bit slower pace and look at some of the aspects in a bit more detail, particularly around today and setting distance learning. So I've tried to set that up for that purpose. And what we'll do is we'll have a look at assignments in Teams, and we'll also have a look at OneNote class notebook. So as far as today's session is concerned, we covered creating accounts, creating teams, and remote learning using Teams introduction last time. That wasn't today. I should have changed that. Today is around OneNote class notebook. It's also around assignments, and you can ask questions if you need to. I'll have some pause points in between. Just a reminder for everyone, because we had a few questions. If I've got this particular device, can I still use Teams? I really want to emphasize that Teams is pretty much universal, and it doesn't matter what sort of device you've got, be it Apple, be it Android, Google device, a Windows device, a Chromebook, an Apple Mac, you can pretty much get to Teams either in a web browser as a tab, or there may be an app to download and install, or there could be a desktop app you can install as well. So it's there, it's available. You just need to go and have a little look on the various store from the app that you'll use, or from the device you're using. Just as a quick recap for last time, for anyone that's joining us for this session and they weren't on the other session, when you go into Teams, it looks a little bit like this. If it's the first time you've used it, you will see these 2 options, which is create team and join team. Somebody can join the team by being given a code, and you can issue the codes once you've got a team created. You can create the teams. When you create them, they'll start to come up like this. You've got 4 types of teams available. Class team is really used for teaching. PLC, professional learning community, is often used for sort of business admin side. So admin teams in schools often use PLCs, as do trusts if you're in an academy. Staff or other tends to get used for teaching and learning purposes for staff. It really doesn't matter whether you use a staff or another. The only thing you'll get that's different if you use a staff team is you'll get the OneNote class, the OneNote notebook, not the OneNote class notebook. The OneNote class notebook is only in the class team. That was a question that came back after the last time session. Once you've created your team, you'll have to name it up, and as soon as you've named it up, you will get your team created. So I'm just going to break out of the slides. Before I go into today's session, did anyone have any follow-up questions from last time, if they need to unmute their mic and ask about that?
Martin, I can't see your slides.
Ah, okay. All right. There's me wittering on, and you can't actually see anything. Can you see it now?
Just loading.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Teams remote learning. Okay.
I can't see anything, Martin. I can now.
Yeah.
See, sometimes there's a black screen depending on your broadband speed. Right, I'll take that from the top again. So this session, we've already covered creating accounts, creating teams, and a brief overview of how teams can facilitate remote learning. Today's really a focus around distance learning with pupils. So OneNote class notebook and using assignments. The any devices bit I won't go through again, but you can see there it's available on practically anything that you've got. If you have an issue with a web browser, try different web browsers. Sometimes Teams can play up. So I had it in one school where it didn't display in Chrome on a particular day, but it worked perfectly well in Edge. Still, I'd recommend getting the new Edge that's built on Chromium. It's got that funny little sort of turquoise blue swoosh as opposed to the old blue E. If you just Google or Bing, depending on which search engine you use, Microsoft Edge new browser, you'll be able to download and install it on your computer. It's pretty good, and certainly if you're using Teams, it's very stable. This is what I was saying. If you were not on the call last time, creating a team, if you're coming into using Teams for the first time, you'll see this screen. You either can get pupils to join Teams by giving them a code, or you can create a team. When you press create team, you've got 4 choices. Classes for learning for pupils, PLCs are for administration side, or if you're in a big academy trust and you've got trust members that are using it on that side. Staff or other is used for staff that are on a learning side of the school, and they've got various features in them. The biggest difference is in the staff one, you've got the staff notebook, whereas in the other you have to manually add it. So then you just name up your team and you can add your members, which we covered last session. If any of you missed that and you want to go back and see that, we've recorded the session. So Ellie from Turn It On is on this call. She'll be able to send you the link to that if you wish to go and get it. I'm just going to break out the presentation this time. You can see it and go over to Teams. But have anyone got any questions before I actually go into Teams today? No, stunned into silence. Okay, so mine has been used a little bit up to now, so you can see that I've got some teams already created. Excuse me. We've got a staff team over here. So that was one of the 4 options at the beginning. We've got a primary scenario team there. We've got a secondary scenario, and I've just got a test team. If you're a staff member and you're joined in multiple teams, this is the sort of view that you'll expect to see once your school has adopted Teams and begins to roll it out. Unless you've decided that staff will only see their own classroom, most schools you have a staff team that someone's a member of and a classroom team. If you're someone on senior leadership team, you might see all the different classrooms around school. Excuse me, I'm a little bit croaky this morning. So we, instead of creating them, are going to look at how to use the functions either in the classroom or in assignments. So we're going to begin with assignments. It's over here on the left hand side. I might just drop the resolution on my web browser a moment to make it a bit more visible. So if we went into assignments, you need to pick which team you want to make the assignment inside of. Assignments will only show class teams. They won't show staff teams because you can't set assignments in anything but a class team because it's educational focused. When you go into your primary classroom, which is the one I'll choose in next, you'll see the assignments that have already been issued. So you can see there's a couple there that have been issued previously. You can see if you've graded any and you've marked them, which is something we'll come on to, the marks appear under here. But you can also then create new assignments. So if you press create, you can create a quiz. So it's really useful part of Teams as it integrates something called Microsoft Forms. We'll do a session on Microsoft Forms in the future. Either it'll be next week or after Easter. But you can create quizzes in Microsoft Forms. The great thing about creating in Microsoft Forms is they'll be available for the future. So if you need to reuse it next year or with another class, and maybe you're sharing because you're in a school where you've got 2 form entry, if one year 6 teacher, for instance, created a quiz in the forms, you could then send it across to the other teacher. But today we're going to create an assignment. When you create the assignment, you need to give it a title. So we're going to call this one class coding, for instance, then. Instructions. So this is really, so you aren't always there. You might kick this off in a live session because you've set up a Teams meeting, but it could also be some distance learning that pupils picking up. So they're going to need a description of what they have to do, what they're expecting as an outcome. You could also put success criteria in here. I've seen staff use it in various different ways. So I'm just going to keep it brief for the purpose of today's. So we're going to use Scratch. You can have points. So points are related to the grades that you saw previously. The points are usually have 100, but you can make it less. At some point in the future, Microsoft will change it to be not out of 100, but to be out of numeric values as well as alphabetic values. So if you want to change it to grading, you can, but at the moment we're stuck with that. You can add a rubric, which if you don't add success criteria in instructions, you can add a rubric here. So for those people that aren't familiar with the rubric, if we could press new rubric, it's got excellent, good, fair, and poor. So they're just ways to describe the different levels of success in achievement, or some schools have it as mild, spicy, hot, whichever terms you use to describe your level of challenge. So enter description here, create a musical instrument using Scratch. And then you can give the different levels of success. And here, if it was Scratch, we'd relate it back to coding and maybe how successful the instrument is by the coding that we use to make it work. Title here, we'll call it Scratch Coding. Description, using instruments. Scratch. You can have points assigned, so I'm going to change that from no to yes, and then you could also attach that to the document. So in we go, and there's our rubric on the side. You can also use other rubrics you've created before, so if you want to create something a little more generic, it's fine. Points are out of 100. Like I said earlier, if you want to change your points and you want to make this out of 50, for instance, you can change that to 50 there. I know it's in my primary demo class. At the moment, it's going to all the students in my class, but I could assign this and be selective and assign it to particular students in the class by pressing the button on the side there. The due date, I'm going to pick when I want this to be due back in. So if we're using this for distance learning, I'm going to say I want this in on Tuesday next week. And the due date is I want it in by 4 o'clock that afternoon. Once you've got it all set up, you just press assign, and then that will be assigned to that class, and it will appear for that class. It'll appear in their feed, and again, depending on your broadband and how fast it is, it might take a little bit of time for you to get the confirmation down the bottom there that it's been assigned. It will then come up in their feed, but also, as you can see on the side there, you've started to get notifications in your teams that new posts have been there, so you can go in and have a look. Also, it will appear for those people that weren't on Monday in your activity feed. There is the assignment. Class coding suddenly appears. So from a high level, on a teacher point of view, you can see what activity is going on. If this was a pupil logged in, they would just see the activity in their class instead of the activity in all the different teams. You only get to see the different teams if you're in as a staff member. So if I went back to the teams, here is my primary class. So for the people that aren't used to this, you'll see all your teams here. If you wish to go into a particular team, and it's the primary demo class that I'm using today, I click the primary demo class. There's my assignments in my posts. I've already previously this morning put on that we're going to start our remote learning session. I've welcomed everyone to Thursday because I'm still interested in my pastoral virtual learning, and I'm going to encourage my pupils or students to make replies down here so I can just get a feel for how they're getting on at home, and just maybe be able to broaden the conversation beyond the academic. You are, again, trying to be a teacher, but it's really difficult if you're not there with them and you haven't got them in front of you. So it's a good way to get them to comment, and they will. They'll readily take that opportunity. If you want to view the assignment and go back in, click view assignments, and it moves over to the assignment tab at the top. So we were in posts, it's gone over to assignments here. You can see here's my class coding. Here's all the students in my class. I've only got 3 in this scenario here. I can see whether they've handed it in early, and I can also give feedback comments. So here, this is one-to-one feedback, so you can still give that feedback, or you can give class level feedback. So you can say, great job. Can you use loops in your coding? And give them a mark, and I'm going to say, well, because they haven't used loops, we're going to give them 40, and then all of a sudden that is in there, and I can return that in there, and then that goes back to them. So 2 grade is over here. These are the students that haven't handed it in yet, but the graded ones over there, I've returned my feedback I've also given them their mark, and then they could also use that to talk to me as well and comment on my feedback to them. So it's like an interactive feedback system for a piece of work that you set using assignments. So it tends to be that assignments is used for setting distance learning pieces of work that you want to see handed back into you in this scenario. You can use it for setting homework if you're there in a day-to-day. The next asset we're going to look at within the general channel of the team here that we're in, which is Primary Classroom, is using OneNote class notebook. And while you're running a lesson or where you're being interactive with them, OneNote class notebook often lends itself to better distributing work or sharing planning in real time. Something that you will get used to with OneNote class notebook is a bit of a shift in the dynamic of how you work. It doesn't turn teaching on its head entirely, but a bit like when we had the change in Ofsted framework, instead of planning your work and your lesson necessarily on a planning document that your school might use, I would say with OneNote class notebook, it's better to plan a good lesson that you intend to be shared with them. So almost open planning. It's like a conscious stream of the flow of the lesson or the flow of the work over the week, because you might use a OneNote class notebook not just for one lesson, but you might use it for maths every day of the week. And you start on the left on the Monday, and you gradually move across through the sheet, because it is just one big endless sheet of paper, and then the pupils can see it just like you can see it. So you're very open about the resources you want them to get to use. You're open about the comments you've written in. If you want to keep something private, you have got a teachers only section here, and in the teachers only section you can have it broken down into the subjects, and that is entirely for staff, you or your colleagues, to go in and get resources. So if you don't want to be completely transparent, you can, but what you often find is you're causing yourself more work, and the planning that goes in here you then have to convert into some sort of pupil or student friendly class notebook. So I've ditched planning in isolation, and I just make my planning entirely transparent, and I intend the use to be for colleagues but also for pupils at the same time. So for anyone that's not familiar with OneNote class notebook, you've got the collaboration space here. The collaboration space is a space that everyone has access to. So that means staff as teachers and pupils as participants in your OneNote class notebook for your team. We've just got everything in the general channel. A discussion last time in the previous session was, instead of having channels here for all the different subjects, it's often better scenario to have all of your subjects listed out in your OneNote class notebook and break the learning down that way, because it's less baffling for pupils or also for parents trying to support pupils at home. They just go to OneNote class notebook and everything's there. If you are a secondary school on this call, I'm just quickly going to jump out and go to my secondary class. Here, what I've done is I've broken down the different channels on the side as English, Maths and Science, and I've included years 7 to years 11. And then when I went into my channel for that team, I would add in a OneNote class notebook over here by pressing the plus, and you get the apps and you can add your OneNote class notebook in there. And then once I've got my OneNote class notebook in, I won't go through it because it takes a little bit of time. In the OneNote class notebook, which would appear there, I would then break that down into my different sets. And then I would add my students in by set, and then the students will only see the set they're attached to. So it's a different way of thinking depending on which phase you're teaching in. So if I pop back to the primary one, because I know I've got mainly primary schools in here, and go back into my OneNote class notebook. So collaboration space is everything. Pupils can pick up work and resources from the collaboration space, and they can take a copy and move it out to their area. They can't really modify them in a great way. They could add comments in, but I would teach them about being respectful, and that if you mess it up for yourself, you're messing it up for everyone else. So be respectful of resources in collaboration space. Content library is more of a read-only place. I've split it out by some subjects in there. So by default, you'll just get using content library. Using content library gives you a brief overview. So if you are not familiar and you think it would really help your pupils, I would probably leave those section descriptions in there to begin with. You can have that as a self-help area for people that can't get hold of you. Maybe you're not on Teams at that particular time. They can go and read the description from Microsoft. It's quite handy just to give them a brief overview. But you've got materials in there that they can take a copy of, but they can't change it, unlike collaboration space. So really that's just a pick up read only resource area. So you might say there's something set for English, go and get it. They then copy it out to their own area. So you can see down here for Henry Marler, he might say, well, I'm going to move that into my class notes. You can describe what these sections are, and you can decide if they're different. When you come to set up your team, you get the option to set these sections, but you can also set more sections afterwards. So if you decided you wanted the same subjects, you just go down to plus section when you're inside that particular pupil, and then it will add in a section for English and math. So it's up to you how many sections you have. It is easier to have less, but again, I appreciate if you're going to start putting multiple subjects into class notes, it can often be a bit of a task to find where the English and the maths are, particularly if they're not naming it with a convention that's easy to find it. You might need to have a session with them when you do introduce this, just to describe how Teams works and where they move their work around, because it's a bit like if you had them in an IT room, or if you had them on a set of laptops in your classroom, you know as well as I do, some of them will not name their work at all, or they'll save it into a whole school shared area instead of their personal area. So it does take a little bit of training them to save it into the correct place. The other area you've got is teachers only. I mentioned this earlier, but that is an entirely private space where you could plan for different subjects. So in the maths planning, you might have it there just to stimulate the staff to talk to each other, put your planning ideas for next week, because it's not always easy to come up with remote learning ideas. If it's science, we might be gathering some useful websites. We probably did that before we shut school, but it's also good to have them in there, because then you can share them out and use them with your own class. I think in English, we started looking at some weekly spellings. So you're setting the expectation from a staffing point of view. You might decide you're going to use pictorial prompts along with the keywords, but also reminding staff about things like the file section up here. So if I went to the file section in English, I've got a spellings folder, and in spellings here I've got the statutory spellings lists for staff to go and refer to, so they can weave some of the statutory words in. We've also got some spelling ideas here for parents, so you might want to set that within your class, but it's a resource there for staff to go and pick up in the file section. Just gives them some sort of independent challenges, encourages that deeper style of learning, but it's less demanding on you to plan it because you've got those pre-written resources. So the file section also becomes quite key in this as an area for storing and organizing resources within your team and within your channel. So this is another reason why I say it's probably best just to stick to the general channel, because then everything is easily found. Whereas if you had a maths and English channel, people would have to go to the file sections within those channels to find the resources instead of the general. I'll pop back to OneNote class notebook again. So it's all well and good. We've got all of this different work. We've got some bits that we've prepared. If I go into the content library and I go into there, I've got, for instance, a very quick piece of work there about shape, and there might be a sheet, because I've set in a sheet in assignments as independent learning for them to go and the lines of symmetry and shapes, and then go off and take some pictures around the real world. If they've got a iPad, or if they've got a Windows tablet or an Android tablet, they can use the draw tools inside of OneNote class notebook. And what they can do is they can ink up. So they might say, well, here is my line of symmetry. It's down there in the middle of my window, and it's easier with a stylus than it is with a trackpad, which is what I'm doing it with. But they can highlight the shape, and they can draw in lines of symmetry. They might say, well, here's a triangle up here, and here, this really shows off my trackpad skills. And there's a line of symmetry down the middle, and they could hand it in like that. They've marked it up over the top, so it's less onerous for you to check and mark, but also it's in class notebook at the same time. If you need to set that work, so if we go back, if you do need to go back, that little arrow that I just pressed there is a good way of setting up. So let's say that you're not going to use the science racing cars project with them in the lesson, but you still want to send that out as a piece of homework in OneNote class notebook. You might decide, actually, as well as setting them assignments, I am going to set them a piece of homework, because they have a homework section. If I looked at my pupil down here, here's my homework. Well, I need to get that to the homework, so I'm going to click over where it says science racing cars. Again, I'm trying to get them to reflect to go away, use resources around the house. So we've got a bit of an eco project there about junk modeling. We're looking at aerodynamics in cars, which you could link back to shape if you're going to hang this all together in one topic. Thinking about vehicles, it might be around them. They could see them in pictures. They could look on the internet. But I'm now going to use OneNote class notebook to get that distributed. So if I went to the class notebook tab, and I've got the option up here to distribute a section. So if you want to, you could send out an entire math section, which will give them all of the pages that you've created in that section. But it's more likely you're going to want to distribute a page. So if you went to distribute page, you can distribute it individually. So if you needed to send something for intervention, you can do it that way, or you can do group distribution. So I'm going to try and send it to all my pupils. So I click the button, out comes the window on the side. It might take a few seconds for it to load up, depending again on your broadband speed at home. When it comes up, you choose the group you're going to have. So you can either select them all together or you can choose them individually. Once you've got them in there and you've got them ticked, you can give your group name. This is my science eco group. I'm going to press save. And then you can distribute out. So that's how you do group distributions. If I was going to do an individual distribution, I go back to here, individual distribution. I'm just going to send this to Sydney because I think Sydney is someone who could deal with some extension. He's one of my G&T pupils. I know that they'll really thrive on this sort of thing. So I'm going to go next. I'm going to pop it into the homework section, and then I press distribute. And Teams takes care of it for you, so you haven't got to go manually copying and pasting and moving files around. It's done all within OneNote class notebook. So once you've got the done symbol there, you can get rid of that on the side. You want to go and check. If you close down Henry, we go to Sydney, down at the bottom there, we click on his homework, and then in homework, with a bit of luck, we should see science of racing cars. And there we go. There it is there. So that's there for Henry to pick up. Henry can do what he wants to that within his homework folder. It won't apply to the original resource. But what you could do is then go in and you can review the student work. So if you went to review student work and you went to homework, go next. This could all be done from within Teams. And I want to review what's been done with science of racing cars. And here I've got Sydney McLeonard, and I can just go through and I can mark it from there. So it's quite quick and easy to use it in Teams itself. The biggest thing that you'll need to consider is how you're going to set out the sections within your, the subsections within your sections in Teams, and then also what pages you're going to add. That's not just for you as a teacher with collaboration space, content library and teacher only, but it's also for your pupils that you're going to add. If you had more times and we weren't in a distant learning situation, you could set this up with your IT support. You could still ask Turn It On to help you with this. So your Turn It On technical consultants can also assist you with creating these pupils, getting them in and helping to create these sections. But you can have templates of sections so that you apply the templates to a class. So if you were creating, instead of just one primary demo class, they said primary class year 1, primary class year 2 and year 3, you could then have the sections on your template, and the sections could be just pushed in instead of you having to make them every time. It just saves time on creation in OneNote class notebook, because I appreciate there will be a bit of an administrative burden to get this set up. I haven't got any more areas that I'm going to cover today as far as either assignments were concerned or OneNote class notebook. It is a reasonably high level tour of how to use them, but it's meant just to get you thinking about what's going to be best for your pupils or your parents or your staff, and how to get started with setting distance learning. I will say, unless your school has already been using Teams, with a great deal of schools over this week, many people aren't looking to start using Teams or Google Classroom until after Easter, and they're just setting work at the moment using more traditional methods, whether it's on the website or however you've got a platform, and then really rolling this out once you've had time to build it and prepare it. I would say it's not something to rush. It's better and it has greater impact and uptake if you can plan it and have it as more of a polished article before you start to share it with the outside world. Right, I'm going to stop talking. I appreciate there might have been some questions that have come in the chat on the side, but you can also unmute your mic and you can ask questions as well. So I've got one from Pam. No, schools are closed. How would you roll out after Easter? So it's all about, Pam, doing the setup of pupils. If you haven't got pupil accounts over at your school, get those set up first, then get those pupils assigned to those teams in the backgrounds. If the pupils haven't got access to their email accounts as it is, they aren't going to see their notification that they've been joined to a team, so they won't be going in to explore it before you're ready. But then you will need to give them their email address and their password to log in. But once they're in, you'll give them, I would say, first of all, almost like a one side of A4 that you could send over to them using whichever method you're using at the moment. So I'm seeing a lot of schools that are sending it out via their website or via a class page on their website with a one side of A4 about how you get started with Teams, get them into the class page or get them into their email address, and then from there get them started by just doing an introduction, a familiarization of how Teams is, how it looks, and encourage the parents to join as well. Get them involved and get them to buy into it, because if you can get that parental support, it's going to be half the battle with this distance learning scenario.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else want to unmute or ask a question on the side? Will it be costly for the school? No, that's the great thing. If you've got Office 365, all of this is in there for free. So staff are employed in doing their jobs, so there's no additional cost for the school as far as recruiting staff or asking them to do anything else. You could reuse subscriptions. So if you've got a Twinkle subscription, let's be blatant about it. If you've got Twinkle or Purple Mash or whatever else, you can just extract some resources from those platforms and you could use them to set up lessons in Teams. But Teams and everything I'm showing you today is free. So if you've got Office 365, there's no additional cost for this. Just set it up, use the licenses you've got for pupils or for staff, and away you go. The only limit is either the time that staff have available or your imagination.
Okay, thank you.
Martin,
Any other questions?
Yeah, Martin, can I just double check, please? If I held a meeting online, I'm able to then see the children, aren't I? They're actually online participating in the lesson.
Yeah, so if you have a live lesson, for instance, and you set this up in the calendar, so it's best to probably set it up as a calendar event, so using calendars over on the side.
Yeah.
Once you've got this sort of situation, you'll see the 4 that will have talked to you most recently here, but you'll see them also along the bottom. Like you can see I've got everyone along the bottom too. So if you ask them a question, they start to talk like you've appeared to me, they'll appear to you. And as long as they've got their camera enabled, you'll be able to see them. And if they've got their mic unmuted, you can talk to them.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I mean, I don't know about online lessons, but I'm thinking of actually just talking to the children, because I think that's what they're missing, is that interaction between me and the children. Do you know what I mean? The teaching, the actual talking, the pastoral side, I think the children are missing more.
Yeah.
That's something, if I pop back here a minute to my primary team and I go back to my posts, it's something that I'm encouraging people to do. So this remote learning and Welcome to Thursday is very much pastoral focused. So you can tag in there that you're going to have a registration time or a get together time. And then they all just join it through there, and it's just a chat. It's just to get to talk to each other and understand what everyone's been doing and make them feel connected, not just with each other but with you, and let them know that you are still there for them.
Yeah, I think that's really important at this time personally.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Wow. I've either confused you, baffled you, or shared it clearly. I would urge you, as I said with many of these webinars, set up a sacrifice test class team. So call it exactly that. Call it your test class, and then set up in there some posts in your stream, get some mock assignments that you're using, have a go at setting a few things up in OneNote class notebook. Even if you've got some pupils that you know won't mind being used as test subjects, and maybe they're children of your staff, you could ask your turn-on consultant to set up some test pupils to put into your test classroom. Just call them like pupil A, B, and C, and then send them mock work. But you could also then share the logins for those pupils with the teachers, so they could log in as a pupil. And you can see what it looks like from the pupil side, not just the teacher side, because that's really important as well, because you're seeing it from one perspective. and you're not necessarily seeing it from their perspective. There are some tools in Teams where you can view it as a pupil. So something you can do is here, if you've got a couple of tabs, you could add up another tab, and if I snap that tab out, you could pin your tabs side by side. So if I had that one there and that one there, so you see what you see as a teacher on the left, and you see what you see as a pupil on the right. So you get a real feel for when you set something up, how does it appear to them as an individual? That's another good way to start working.
I like that.
Anyway, I've got another question potentially in the feed. Do you have any guidance on how pupils work respectfully in collaborative spaces? Okay, we don't have anything written down. Most of this is just your knowledge, having been a teacher for years and years, and either working as a class teacher or working in a different role as Senko, or maybe having a pastoral responsibility in school for managing behaviour or interventions, and just talking with them very openly. Do let them know if they don't follow your wishes and they don't use the gift of having Teams appropriately, that you can mute them. You could silence them for a period of time. You could delete their comments. You can censor what they're doing, but encourage them to take responsibility for this and take on that. This is an amazing opportunity. Yes, they're no longer together face to face, but they won't get this necessarily if they were in another school, and really make the most of being able to still communicate with their friends. My daughter isn't in the Office 365 world, she's in the Google world, but her class have been talking to each other since last Friday, and there's some quite lively characters, let's say, in her class, who would definitely keep you on your toes if you were a teacher, if you were face to face with them on a daily basis. But those individuals have been extremely respectful and caring of each other in the chat that's been going on in that online platform. And because they live in a digital world and they're more adapted to that, I think they just take it on board and they run with it.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Anyone else want to unmute and say anything?
Out of curiosity, how old are your children, please?
My daughter is 9. So she's at school at the moment. Yeah, so she's firmly footed in the end of year 4. Whether they go back or not, I don't know. But
I was just wondering how flexible this is with regards to children who are obviously in EYFS or Key Stage 1.
Yeah, it is more of a challenge. I'm not going to deny that. If you've got EYFS in Key Stage 1, I would keep it very simple. So quite a few of the schools I'm working with have decided not to use necessarily the assignment feature or even the OneNote class notebook, because it's just too overwhelming. The children can't cope with it, and keep it purely down to posting individual things in the post stream over here, and making it things that either they can go and look at, so such as there might be something on Jolly Phonics, or setting them a theme for a day, or even recording themselves. I've seen some teachers doing it's recording themselves doing an activity like you'd have set up in reception. So you might have different stations they're going to. So you record that, you share it with them as the class teacher so they still see you, and then they go away and have a go at that. You'll get less in the way of feedback unless the parents are going to put some comments on there for you, but you're still able to communicate. Another nice way I've seen it, and Pam, you alluded to this earlier, is recording pastoral things. So such as reading a book with them. So you record yourself reading, I don't know, Room on the Broom, let's go for the stereotypical example, but they can still sit down with their parents and they can participate in that. They can have that input that they would normally get in school, but it's all just contained in posts here. So you don't make it coming and scroll here and finding a link for a website or an activity or watching a video that you popped in there. Joy's fallen off her perch there. Welcome back, Joy. Any other questions or anyone else? Actually, I've seen another post has gone in on the side. Turn it on. For EYFS and Key Stage 1, what are you adding could mainly support parents at home to deliver the sessions? Yeah, it is a good point, Noddy, and I do emphasise there that in those lower key stages and EYFS, you are going to need the support and buy-in from parents in quite a radical way. It could be that you say, look, here's a worksheet, for example, and you put it in the post and you say, print this out. Obviously, print paper and everything permitting, print it out and have a go at it. Another way around that I've seen with PDFs. So if you've got a resource that was pre-made, it is surprising how many people have got a tablet device or a touchscreen device with a stylus, and they could ink on it on the screen, and then they could save it and send it back and share it. So get them to, if they can, the parents to pop it back in, and then that saved PDF, if they've just done a drawing, a very simple drawing, or they've decided to draw shapes like what's a triangle, what's a square, and so forth, they could pop that back on. So you've got that dialogue going backwards and forwards. Noddy, if you want to unmute and contribute to this, feel free. Noddy is one of our teaching consultants at Turn It On. No.
Can I ask, are you able to transfer documents from OneDrive straight onto the teachers area?
Yes, you can. If I go back over to here. So in files itself is just sat on top of, without getting too techy, it's sat on top of something called SharePoint, which is just Microsoft Cloud Storage. So you can move things in. If you went to the open in SharePoint there, it will open a new tab in your window. So you will leave Teams, but you haven't lost it. It's still sat there. And up here at the tab at the top, I see what I see in Teams, but it's in SharePoint. And then what you can do is you can move documents in from your things like your OneDrive or your other SharePoint app
and then move
here.
it across. Yeah, that makes it easier.
So that moves it, that's more of a traditional view. And if you are having an absolute mare of a time, and I do get this quite frequently, Martin, I'm tearing my hair out, things don't upload properly, do go across to that view and do it in here, because it's easier than trying to, or also managing moving documents around. So if I wanted to move that maths blog, it's easier to move it in here than it is in here.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. We are recording this. It's still live at the moment. So what we'll do after the session, we'll turn it into one of our videos on our YouTube channel again so that you can get broader access to it. Don't forget that the links we gave you previously in the materials, you can go to the Teams materials on the Microsoft website. We can redirect you to those again. There's a lot of help out there. There's a lot of people talking on communities like this on a daily basis. We are going to keep these sessions running. So as a company, we made a decision that we'll continue into next week. We're going to blend it with one day being Microsoft and one day being Google. And we'll go through after Teams, we'll go through the other apps it might be useful. So I said Google Forms. We're going to have one session on Google Forms about how to create revision questions or how to create quizzes using Google Forms. And then you could use that in Teams. And we'll look at the other apps that are in Office 365. We'll do something very similar for Google in G Suite. So tomorrow will be a Google day. And in G Suite, we're going to look at setting work in the assignments feature in Google Classroom. So if you know, and on St. Amand's crew, you might well be interested in this. If you know that's something you're interested in, that you can join us tomorrow on that. You don't have to be a Google school to join a Google session, and likewise, you don't have to be an Office 365 school to join this in either. I would say if your school is down one route or the other, at the moment with the situation we find ourselves with distance learning, I would encourage you to stick with the platform you have, but it doesn't mean you can't use this for consideration for the future. And also CPD for yourself. Okay, I'm not going to talk any longer. I will remain on the chat just in case anyone has anything they want to ask me as people drop off. But I'll either see you tomorrow if you're going to join our Google session. If you do want to join our Google session tomorrow and you haven't yet signed up, Ellie Wilding, who's on this call from Turn It On, will be able to get you signed up. If you want to join any of the sessions next week, we're going to advertise them today or tomorrow. So you'll get the itinerary of sessions that are available with times and so forth and what's going to happen on each day. So if you wish to sign up, Ellie is your person and she will get you involved so you can join like you have been, and we'll continue these. So it's very non-threatening, it's very open. We're trying to make it so very much self-contained about in one aspect so that you can just go away and have a go.
Thank you, Martin. It's been very useful.
Thank you. How do you get rid of the blur?
The blur?
Yeah, how do you get rid of it?
Which blur have you got going on, Pam?
On my picture, I can just...
Oh, you there?
Yeah.
That's just due to your broadband at home and in the speed that it can send data out. So if compared to Joy over here, who's you probably may have a faster connection, yours is Teams is just compensating for that. So to allow you still to be here, it's dropping the quality of your call.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Bye.
I'll let you all drop off for a moment, but I will stop the recording so that we can just talk normally. So I'll stop the recording now.
Thank you.